But most physical wars start with culture wars. This mentality that I have to like convert you into something is it's anti-American, and yet here it is on our soil, right?
Good evening, everybody. This is Joe at the MiddleGround Mic. We've got a fantastic author and journalist on here tonight. Alison Sher, is that how you say your last name? Sher. Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Your book, Social Contagion, Viral Ideologies. I mean, no matter what side you're on, you can't deny that that pretty much is, to me, like we were talking a little bit ago, it's infected like everything, and I really appreciate you coming on. Like we were just talking a little bit ago, we try to cut through the, not want to say like necessarily cut through the noise, but get rid of echo chambers. We just had last week we had a gentleman on because there's no actual such thing as Antifa, but
Mm.
um it's kind of like a their movement or whatever you want to call it. And he lives, I think this is like a block from the Portland fiasco going on right now. So that was definitely it was interesting. Probably one of the most interesting interviews I've ever done in my life on anything. Oh yeah, it was crazy. But just tell everybody a little bit about who you are. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. My name's Allison. I'm the author of the new book called The Social Contagion Viral Ideologies and the Culture War for America's Future. And I've worked for 15 years as a journalist, an author, helping other people publish their books, a researcher, and just any kind of communications work, especially in the written form, is what I've devoted my career towards.
Awesome. Awesome. Speaking of that, whoops. Maybe tell everybody a little bit about um your viral ideologies like as a belief system.
Well, it's mainly about like how belief systems spread, and memetics is one term for that. But yeah, when certain memes, I guess you want to call them, which are units of cultural conversion, is one translation of that term, start to spread exponentially, we start to see changes happening inside of our society, and people who begin to identify with those belief systems, forming movements, groups, imposing their beliefs on side of others, trying to convert others to their beliefs. And this could be religious, political. It is what creates culture essentially. And this book focuses on the memes that spread during the pandemic and are still present in our society today.
Yeah, and like you were just saying, the pandemic, it really did accelerate a lot of things. Trust in institutions. I mean, they say institutions, but to me, trust in our society kind of faltered. How we combat things. I remember, I don't know, 20 years ago or whatever it was. It was, to me, anyways, it was kind of like the Democrats who were a little bit more anti like vax and things of that nature, right? And then somehow between then and COVID, it all kind of, I don't know, it kind of changed. And it's really hard to I guess identify it. Obviously you know a little bit more about that, but like from your perspective, like how has COVID filtered into where we're at now?
Yeah, well, I think perceptions of the different parties' political platforms certainly shifted. And I think one popular perception was that the conservatives kind of became the anti establishment party, and the liberals were the establishment. And
Yeah.
previously, I think it had been different. It had switched. So that was one thing. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that Trump just installs his people in to become the establishment when he's president. Um, so I don't necessarily think we have these like vigilantes in our
Oh, yeah,
government.
no,
It's just a
not at all.
different. a different almost dynasty, I guess, that comes in with their own different philosophies and belief systems. But I think regardless of who's in power, most of it is for the sake of financial gain and against what's positive for our communities and our people at large. And is there a lesser of two evils? I think we could sit here and argue till we're blue in the face, depending on how you perceive what's
Oh
going
yeah.
on, right? But like truth is three-dimensional. It's
Yes.
right? It's like it's all it includes everything and every different way of looking at things. So I think it's important to remember that. And that's what my one of the main initiatives of my book is to help people see the whole three-dimensional picture of past 5 years.
Yeah, I love that you said, picking the lesser of two evils. And, I know a lot of people these days do more of a party when they're talking about that. At least when I was growing up, I'm 40, so I'm not like archaic or anything, but getting there, it was always, I mean, you had everybody kind of had their sides, but a lot of people to a degree would be like, choose less two evils, more dependent on what they had to say to a degree.
So you're saying like the lesser of two evils was picked on how they orated their platform and
Yeah.
their campaign promises and less about what they actually did while in office?
Yes. Who was I going to say? Ronald Reagan in '84, he won 49 of 50 states. And I believe, off the top of my head, I believe Richard Nixon had won all 50 states in terms of the electoral college. So, it was, I'm definitely not a fan of Richard Nixon, but it was more of people liked what he had to say, and you have to really convert a lot of your opposite party, whoever you are, to win 50 states. And now, like, I mean, you could have the cure for cancer, solve every single problem in the world, and if you're on the opposite side, people are gonna, oh no, won't work. You're bad, and it's just, no matter who you are.
Yeah, maybe perhaps there's more tribalism now. Certainly, I would say there seems to be an increased amount of like animosity, and we've somehow, and I do think this was heightened in the pandemic for sure, but somehow we've convinced people that the other side is attempting to kill the other side, right? Kill them, right?
Yeah,
We've convinced everyone that the other side is the source of all of the problems in the world.
yeah. I use Obama as a really good analogy for myself and a lot of, I would say, middle of the road people. I voted for Obama his first term. A big thing I loved about him is he was going to go after the banks. He was going to really like rein that in. And then he lost me about a year in because of one of the few things he did within his first year was give all the banking executives bonuses and the upper management. And he said, "Well, we got to retain talent." And I'm like, "Well, they bankrupted the country. I mean, maybe I'm just out of line here, but I would be okay losing that talent. They pretty much all collided or colluded with the government to bankrupt the country." And he kind of lost me at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if we really lived in a capitalist society, then the banks would have just gone bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
But the government intervened to keep the system afloat, right? So,
I
yeah.
really Iceland, I believe, if I'm right, Iceland jailed all their executives in banking, or some of them. I think they were the only country in the world to actually do it. You've done a lot of work on a lot of this. So, I mean, it's not like I haven't seen it anywhere in your stuff, but like, has do you feel like China has pushed any of that, like in terms of not like in terms of like influencing elections or nothing like that, but like with the COVID aspect? Do you think any of that, like some people like they have like the paranoia, oh, it was on purpose, not on purpose. They were trying to change certain things.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it can be argued. In the book, I talk. So what I see happening right now, as I perceive it, and that shape shifts and changes, but where I'm at currently is I see the U.S. declining in power on the global stage, and so now we have different countries with different kind of organizational systems that are gaining power, right? And that could be a conspiracy or just cause and effect of just decisions that have made that have weakened the US and decisions that have made that have strengthened other countries. And so then you have, communism competing for global domination. You have the Western way of life competing for the global domination. You have theocracies like Iran competing for global
Oh
domination.
man.
And yeah, like w- I think it's far fetched to think this was like some conspiracy that China and Biden or whoever orchestrated to continue to weaken the US so that communism and globalism would prevail on the world stage against Western values. I think it's more insidious in that there's not one person to blame. Like a lot of people want to blame Fauci, but that it's more of like a giant grotesque system
Yes.
where things like disease and public health are weaponized, sometimes like unintentionally, just like through the capitalist engine and the arm of it, and that it's created all of these adverse side effects for
Yeah.
people. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I think, and I think that COVID was actually an accident, but should our governing public health bodies be funding gain of function research? No, it's like a larger systemic issue that the government is funding all this research that actually has like detrimental impact to human health. So that's what I see. Now, I don't know how anyone would actually know what's true, but that's more so what I see. I don't think it's as yeah, I just don't think it's as nefarious as some people make it out to be after doing extensive research.
For sure. I mean, it's kind of like I attribute it to if you're the president, right? The economy goes down, you're in office, you're at fault. It goes well, and Fauci was the man in that seat, and he made a lot of choice words and decisions that a lot of people just didn't sit well with them. You know, right or wrong, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I just know that some of it didn't sit well with me, and I got COVID before the shot, and I didn't even barely notice it. But after I got the first Pfizer shot, when I got COVID again, I was hurled under my blankets, feeling like I was clinging for life. And I'm like, man, I know. And then when they said, well, we never said it wouldn't get you, that it would prevent COVID. And it's like, actually, that was what the thing was when it first started coming out. The, and then it just kind of obviously shifted. But so that was just, I think what really killed the COVID vaccine from even being more accepted is the fact that a lot of people were told, take it or else. And, the natural American spirit is pretty much just like, you're going to buck the man. I mean, that's just what America has done forever. And, people I mean, compared to other countries, people in America really don't like being told what to do, you know?
Yeah, compared to other countries, we're way louder. We consider it our we're like entitled. We're entitled to just fight about things, and in other countries, people just do what they're told much more silently. But,
Yes.
this raises issues of, like, individualism versus collectivism and things like that. I only got COVID once, and I immediately took hydroxychloroquine, and it stomped it out. There's still so much controversy on whether or not the studies that proved that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were effective at treating COVID, if they were funded by Gates people, like a lot of questions around whether they were studying people who had developed the virus for multiple days, and so their body was overloaded with the viral load, and so no antiviral is going to work. It's like the herpes medicine, you take it right when you get the first sign, right? But if you let it progress, it's not gonna do anything. So there's all sorts of variables that I think are still being debated, but I think the whole event really created an epistemological crisis where now we don't even trust science, which was the one sort of tool we had for validating what information is accurate and what's not, and who the experts are, and if they're bought out. And I think it has made it so that there is, like you said, this like mass distrust of everything, like everything you read, every single institution, right, is like in collusion against the truth, and it's made it so that sometimes people are like living in very separate worlds from one another, but through excuse me, through dialogue and sense making and the things that you do on this show and we do through just speaking with one another, especially people who don't think the same way as we do, we start to see that three-dimensional truth more so. And just like the civic dialogue around our ability to collectively process what we're all going through, and in that time we had such a collective global trauma, and I in my life I don't think I've ever seen everyone on the planet going through the same exact crisis.
No, not at all, not in my lifetime. That it made me think about, I had talked to someone about, so social media, I believe it's Finland or Norway, is doing a very similar thing that Australia is doing. I think where they're banning social media for under the age of 16 or 15. And, you know, I grew up in a different time. I grew up as things changed. So it didn't have the same impact on me that it has on like my kids. My son has a completely different relationship with social media than I do. He takes it a little bit more to heart. I'm making it a priority to get him to not do things like that, but it's just, that and social media, I think, puts things in a perspective to where we're talking, on camera, we can see each other's face, right? Where sometimes, you're just seeing somebody post on Facebook, you don't see their face. So people tend to, I want to say, feel a little bit more emboldened, right? To whereas if you talk to your neighbor next door that might not agree with you on it, as long as you two don't like aren't committed to screaming at each other, you'll probably go, yeah, it is what it is. You go and live your life, I'll go and live mine. We gotta live next to each other. Is where that doesn't happen online. And I think that that is like a big factor in it. You had something that nobody in this generation or pretty much alive today had, never dealt with anything like that. And then you have social media, which gives a lot of some terrible people a platform to say some crazy things that are out of this planet.
Yeah, it also feeds into this mass delusion that somehow in sharing our opinions, like we're actually going to enact policy change. I mean, maybe there's some chances where that happens, but it's like we've been convinced that this platform is like a venue for us to engage in the democratic process, and it's going to connect us to people all over the world. And my feeling now is that that's more so of an illusion, and I believe it's actually a tool that's being used to divide and radicalize us.
Yeah, I did an episode with a guy. His name's Jacob Ward. He was a NBC reporter, political and tech, and he had worked for Al Jazeera America. He made sure to distinct Al Jazeera in America versus. He goes, they are two separate.
Yeah.
But the tech thing, right? So he was talking about how like tech CEOs, like a lot of what are conventional for kids today, they don't allow their kids to have a lot of certain things like social media in certain exposures till they're in their teenage years. Like it's like automatic for them, even though a lot of them make products that are geared towards kids under that. They won't allow their own kids to touch it because they are very well knowing what it does. I'm working on an episode right now that I've been researching on Discord and Roblox. They have just now started doing act things to protect, kids, but it's more of they've known about it for the past 5, 6 years that the level it has gotten to. And they did nothing until they got put out in on blast online, whatever you want to call it these days.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel the impacts on my brain. My boyfriend's always yelling at me that I'm twacked out on my phone and just like that like surge and expecting information on your fingertips and going towards these things to consume content. And I think for younger generations especially, it's the sole place where they go for information on how to interact with the world and understand it. Today I was at a bookstore, like this beautiful I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I there's this beautiful old bookstore, like just like filled with these classic rare books, and it's beautiful inside. I was like, people used to just all go to the library
Yeah.
to figure out stuff. And so everyone had access to the same books, the same information right before these tools. Like that's like a totally different way of orienting to the world, and now we just have these phones. And I mean, I'd probably be hard pressed to find a Gen Z or the people who are even before them who are just going to the library to figure out what's going on. Like that doesn't happen probably very much anymore.
It it's odd. It's so Gen Z is I don't know if you've heard of the Yale poll that came out, I don't know, it was a month or 2 ago. It really talked about how Gen Z 18 to 21 is 12 points more conservative than Gen Z 21 to 28 or 22 to 20, I should say. So they're by 12 points, they're more conservative. And they're actually this is as of a couple months ago, the majority of them were conservative. They voted and they thought conservative, not like what the traditional conservative is. And I think that that definition is very changing because conservatism is to me a lot more populist now. But they go to church on a higher per person rate than the last two generations. And and I'm like, I thought it was very, telling, very confusing at the same time. Because if you turn on any social media, anything, right, you just see all you see is the crazies most of the time. And then you find this poll that comes out and you're like, oh man. And then Charlie Kirk, that whole incident, right, where he was shot and murdered. And, next thing you know, churches are just overflowing out the doors. They don't got enough seats for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, with this administration, we are seeing a rise in the popularity of Christian nationalism and
Yeah, big time.
under the umbrella of populism. And just that's something that's happening. And that's a meme, I guess you could say, that is getting viral, right? So
Yes,
that's
big.
that's the metaphor there. Yeah.
And I think it's probably safe to say that even like 2 years ago, I don't think anybody would ever see the wave of things going the way that they are. So I was looking at a recent poll. So you got the government shutdown going on right now. Well, I mean, to be fair, Democrats usually have are way better at going on your traditional media platforms and getting their message across, where conservatives seem to be better on like podcasts, the more of the independent channel. CNN was like going after them, like after like Chuck Schumer and I forget the other lady. They were like, "Hey, Republicans have done ABC 13 times. You voted no. They've tried to do ABC." And they just were kind of like, well, and then they would just change the subject or like try to go off. And I guess it was very like, okay, wow, the public is still blaming them for it, even though the public is really pissed off at some of the stuff the administration's doing. They are still looking and going, hey, what you're doing is not okay. And obviously when places like CNN, they do, they survey people online for the most part. So they're not getting a super older audience, it's probably a little bit more mixed with the younger crowd. So I feel like there is some kind of gleam of hope. Just for me, it's not conservatism or liberalism. It's just more of like common sense, but at the same time, respecting everybody's right to be different and live. it feels like that's kind of gone out, like, to me, that's, like, the number one thing that's gone out the window.
Everyone's trying to convert everyone else into their way, like they found the way and now they're going to create a coaching business around the way and they're going to propaganda and market for the way
Man.
to me, it goes back, and my book is actually somewhat esoteric. I always try to bring things not just on a political level, but bring it up to a more transpersonal. I mean, you could even go like metaphysical, spiritual level, because I do believe that's also part of this equation. Um, but yeah, the Buddha always said that the enlightenment was beyond concepts, but that's really hard for people to release. And so we sit here and we wage our wars over our concepts that we cling to. And we become so self-righteous about it
Yes.
that, I mean, it inspires people towards jihad. And how do you convince someone to die at war for the American way or whatever it is? It's just nonstop throughout history is that we like that warrior spirit. It's very human, and it also casts a huge shadow of destruction on the world, right? But I think there is like this idea that we convince ourselves that it's like what we're doing is holy in some way for the greater good of all. It gets very tangled and twisted, and we can easily convince ourselves that we're doing things for the right reasons when the results end up being just more suffering across the world. But that's also just like the human way. That's like the way of the world and history and all this stuff. So um
It seems like, every so many couple hundred or 1,000 years, things kind of advance, but then it seems like things kind of go backwards and then they advance again. You go from the Roman times of plumbing and everything to the Dark Ages to the Enlightenment period, to the Industrial Revolution to the Information Age, and now people are kind of craving going back to like an industrialization type of everyday living. There's like a huge like uptick in a desire for that, like just globally. Mostly in the Western world, because a lot of people view the Western world. We've kind of, I don't want to say gone away from what we were, but I don't even know how to say it. I mean, it's different. Like in the '90s, that was like generally my growing up. You always just lived in the moment. I mean, it's not that it was just so much greater. It's That's what it was. I mean, there really wasn't anything else. And I equate that to my son's reality is always going to be different than mine. You know, his world's going to be different than mine. I view things through the '90s lens. He's going to view things through today's lens. He's gonna look at me and go, "Dad, you're crazy."
so my first book was actually about like the millennials, which I'm a millennial, and these like intergenerational tensions that shape culture. So it's interesting for you to bring that up because that's also like these memes too spread generationally. Um, and there tends to be also a lot of blame put on the different generations as well.
Especially boomers.
Yeah, right. And then they're like, "You millennials are worthless." So so really interesting concepts too that I've studied in the past, like around generational identity, intergenerational tensions, and how those evolve complex systems. But but yeah, there's so many different ways to look at things. And
Yeah.
I think opening up our
Have
talk
you heard of the what they call the Zennials?
the Zillennials.
Yeah, Zillennials. That's technically I fall in that category.
Mm.
So, I definitely when I learned about it, I was like, "Oh man, that definitely makes a whole lot more sense to me." It was like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, no, that it just made sense." I'm like, "Okay, I get this." I'm like, because some stuff Gen X and, boomers, yeah, I like some of what they had to say. And I do have a lot more forward thinking than my conservative grandfather did. My conservative grandfather was everything was one way, the world was one way, you can't think anything different, and I'm a little bit more like, hey, I'm to me, I think I'm trying to be more for the ideals of what America is supposed to be. You live your life, I live mine, don't shoot at each other, we all have a good day. you
Yeah.
know And that's definitely not like a Gen X necessarily or baby boomer way of thinking.
Yeah, we're all trying to convert. We're all trying to get our ideology to be viral.
Yeah,
And that's why it's like the viral ideologies and the culture war for America's future. Because like right now in the States, we just have a culture war going on. But most physical wars start with culture wars, right? So things to be aware of. But yes, this mentality that I have to like convert you into something is it's anti-American, and yet here it is on our soil, right? So
yeah, did okay for a couple 100 years.
yeah. So interestingly, and maybe this is a kind of a segue, but I want to give a shout out to this book that I edited called Before War, and it's by this writer named Alicia Deva, and she's an anthropologist. She's kind of Graham Hancocky in that she's trying to defy the academic paradigms on like the true origins of civilization and things like that. But the whole book is around like the matriarchal origins of Western society, and she has substantial evidence, anthropological evidence that we used to exist in matriarchy. And during that time, there was no evidence of actual armed conflict. I'm not advocating here now for like this meme of matriarchy to go like spread through the planet and dismantle everything we have. But it is very interesting, and it was a totally different ecosystem. We lived in villages. It was before the Bronze Age, all these different, what in the book she says shifted the cultural paradigm was a climate change event. So I sometimes look at to this current threat of climate change and be like, perhaps, not that I want widespread destruction and, mass diasporas of refugees, invading it sounds like a hot mess, but, um, but if scientists are accurate, I also understand the other more like conservative theory that it's geoengineering, and I think there's validity to all this too. But like, this could result in a civilization switch.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
No, you're already seeing it.
it's just the way of the world. Like these like empires rise and falls, the way of human life organizing itself on the planet, it just changes throughout times, and then we have these different power structures that emerge, and maybe it'll be for the better, maybe it'll be for the worse, but here we are just like sands in an hourglass, the days of our
You are not wrong.
life.
My s I talk to my son usually when because I drive him to school every morning and, he's about to be 16, thank the Lord. And I'll just kinda talk to him about some of this stuff. I'll be like, "Hey, well, what do you think about the president? What do you think about this?" And I'm always asking him, I'm like, "What are your friends at school saying about, whatever issue?" And we talk about it, but, like, the one thing among all of it is a lot of them are passionate. They're very passionate. But at the same time, it's not as it doesn't bother them as much as it's made out to be. It's like, yeah, they may have a feeling towards quote unquote woke or, towards gender identity or whatever. They do have like feeling, but it's not as you only see like the phrase squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? That's what people see and they think that that's how all of them are. And I'm like, I'm learning that now that I have a high schooler that that is the furthest thing from the truth. And it was I guess it was surprising, right? Because before I had a son in high school, I didn't really have any exposure to high school kids, so I never really knew. It's a whole different world out there than I guess I would have ever imagined. I mean, to me, there's a lot of positive, a lot of negative too. But I see the younger generation, especially Gen Z, and what's the generation after Gen Z? I forget the name of it.
Is it
Um,
A? Does it go back to A? Can we get
I
a
think
yes
so.
here? I feel like I should know because I guess whenever I write about a book, I just exhaust so much energy on the topic that after
Oh,
I become disinterested. So I'm like, I should know as the generation girl, but I think it's some generation alpha. Is
Yeah,
it?
alpha, that's it, alpha,
Okay.
alpha.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, it is the youth culture is what is very revolutionary. It has a revolutionary spirit. And then, as you get older, you start to get tired, and then you're like, this is just the way the world is, and you have to figure out how to survive. But, the young people still usually have that idealism, and you could look to them for hope. And, I was quite idealistic as a young sprout myself.
oh yeah,
And
oh yeah,
and as I've gotten older, I'm just like, I don't know if there's anything we can do to change it. And that's why this new book I have has such a different tone than my first book, which is so aspirational and so prescriptive. And this is just like more of a scene history of the past 5 years, and it's more descriptive. And it's like, I don't know if I can change it, but maybe I can write about it in a way that's peaceful
yeah, yeah, and it gets people thinking.
and get
You
people
know,
thinking.
yeah, like, what was it? What was I gonna say? Before COVID, I know myself and a lot of people used to love, hey, I'm gonna go by the store real quick and pick something up. To where now your mentality is, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with the people that are gonna be in that place. Let me just hit order and it'll be at my doorstep. I think that has less to do with convenience and we disguise it as convenience, but I think it has more to do with people are detached to a degree.
Like an antisociality or
Yeah.
something emerged, and yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I live in a very strange place that's very community oriented and full of hippies, so I don't know if I necessarily observe that here, and I've been here a while. So I don't know, like, maybe it is like that, like, I don't know, but I mean, I don't necessarily see that. Um, and but I could see how perhaps we're, like, hooked into our devices and tech and convenience culture to such an extent that we're becoming more isolated. And maybe, like, wanting and maybe this goes into the whole like, scandal culture and political violence and all the things that we're seeing. It's like we're hiding behind our computers. We don't know how to talk to one another in nuanced ways that are kind and tolerant. We're losing these very human to human skills, and that perhaps more than anything
Yeah.
would detract from our quality of life more so than what's being broadcast on the news.
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes that I had read, you had said is empathy is contagious too.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot more empathy now than there ever has been. And here's my argument for this. You'll see not the people you see on TV, but you'll see a lot of people now I mean, you got the ones that literally always have their phone up when something crazy is happening. But I am starting to see more and more where people are starting to run to the quote unquote rescue of a situation. I don't know if you've seen that video that it went around where I think it was like at a fair, like the pirate ship was like tipping when it was going back and forth. And the first default, and that was like a year or two ago. The first default thing is everybody went there and jumped on one side of it to hold it down until it stopped. Like it was just like an automatic. And I was like, it's still there, and now it's kind of starting to come out to a degree.
I survived Hurricane Helene here in Asheville, so I saw this, like, rapid community response, and I really don't have a negative perception of humanity whatsoever. I really don't. I don't carry that. But
Oh yeah, no, definitely not. I mean,
that was a
it's very
perfect
it's very
example.
confusing time to me.
There's a little bit of a lapse. Can you repeat what you said?
Oh, oh, I was just saying, I was like, like I don't view humanity negatively either.
Okay.
To me, yeah, to me, it's a very weird time for humanity because it to me, I guess maybe like you had brought up the Bronze Age earlier. It's like going from nomad slash you know grazers to societies. I can only imagine the kind of cultural shift that happened there and how I guarantee you that was really intense. It had to have been,
Yeah, now we're seeing it with the AI and the technology is really shaping the culture and yeah, but these technocrats, some of them do have a very negative view of humanity and they think
especially
that
Elon.
these machines are better than us, but I mean, I look at us and I'm like, we're so endlessly creative. There's such a desire in so many of us to plug in altruistically. I watched it during this hurricane. Um Yeah, I mean, it's all I feel at peace with it all.
No, I'm glad that you've seen that because that's awesome. I mean, here I tell everybody Michigan's kind of like I call it a nirvana in terms of I don't call it quality of living necessarily, but the able the ability to achieve a standard of living here because things are to me are compared to everywhere else I've been in America are very reasonably priced.
Mm,
You can buy a 3 or 4 bedroom home that was made in the 60s that's in perfect condition here for like 180,000, 170,000. Right. So it's completely people are like, "Don't you wanna move?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd like to go certain places." I'm like, "But they're not as affordable as this place." So I like it because I'd like to hold on to as much money as I can and spend it as wise as I can. But I mean, not very many places left in the country you can purchase a home at that price.
yeah,
You
no,
know,
no, there's not.
even if you made $20 an hour, if you worked hard, you saved, and you had a spouse or partner, you say you could actually at some point probably afford that and afford to raise a family on that. Yeah, I mean, obviously you want to make more than $20 an hour. Long term, that's not great. It just still puts it in reach for
Mhm.
people, and I think that's. And then when I just see certain things, like when you see somebody lose their home here, especially if it's under shady circumstances, I'll put it like that because that surprisingly that happens where the government will be shady and take somebody's house over $5. It happened in Detroit not that long ago. But the whole community just comes out, and they were just like, I mean, they cornered pretty much the city government. They went to council meetings, they harassed them coming out of their offices, and eventually the city said, "Oh, whoops, we made a mistake." Where before these people did that, they were gonna take this I think she was like 80 years old, they were gonna take her home over $5 that she had from some kinda tax from years and years ago that she didn't pay.
Wow, now I really wanna pay my taxes, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
I
it
think
was like
you're due for yeah, from last year. Okay, yeah, maybe.
so but yeah, wrap up here. I really appreciate you coming on and keep writing books like that because people just they need to hear it. They need to hear what it is and that there is hope. Like it's important.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the hope is that we each have a choice on our attitude towards what's going on and can sometimes require substantial amounts of processing, but I do feel like the process of writing, and that's why I write books more so than the financial gain because there isn't really one. But there is almost like a process that I undergo through the process of writing where I can start to like transcend the material that I'm writing about. And the goal of my book, if anyone reading wants to pick it up, is to help you transcend it as well. And so that's where I think the hope resides, is that we each as individuals can find like equanimity, peace, whatever you want to call it, with what's transpiring from our overlords onto us. And perhaps if we reach a critical mass of enough of those people, like we'll have more peace on earth. And yeah, what did they say? It only takes 10% for critical mass to happen.
Yeah, for mass change.
Yeah, for mass change.
It goes
So
back to the vast majority of people in the colonies didn't participate in the Revolutionary War. It's
yeah,
actually a very small percentage.
yeah. Like my views, I kind of participate in these wars and these battles because but it's a mindset process that I had to go through because I think anyone ingesting social media, mainstream media, whatever, it programs you to become politically captured.
Yes.
So
Yes, it does.
what is the process of liberating oneself from that?
No, I would agree.
Yeah.
Alice, everybody, I really, really, really suggest you check out the social contagion at AlisonSher.com. It's not spelled like the artist share. It's Sher.
Yes, it's like the diva, but with an S.
Yeah, and because things like that are what people need to come back down to reality, out from the crazy cloud is what I like to call it,
Mhm.
and bring back down to earth. But, Allison, I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on here. Things you do are important in this world.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
All right, pleasure. Thank you.